And with that, judges, please introduce yourselves.
So good afternoon, Illinois. I guess it's afternoon there, even though for our Hawaii judge, it's still early in the morning. My name is Andy Levy. I'm a trial lawyer from Baltimore, Maryland, and I also teach at both of Maryland's law school, the University of Maryland and the University of Baltimore.
Good morning. My name is Anthony Miller. I am an alumni of the program, so I competed my senior year of high school, and I've been a coordinator working with the program for the last 10 years since, helping to organize the competition and coach teams. And this is my first year here judging at the national competition. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys have for us today. Thanks so much for being here.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Sue.
I was about to say good morning because it is morning where I am, but good afternoon to you. I'm Susan Arnett. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, just retired from the public defender's office in Honolulu, and I also teach at the William S. Richardson School of Law at the University of Hawaii. And I'm going to ask that you very clearly state your names because I can't read them on the board behind you when you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so please go ahead and introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Hi, we're Maine South Unit 4. Our esteemed coaches are Andrew Trankel and Kevin C. Hansen. I'm Jackie Honan.
I'm Nicole Chushevich.
I'm Molly Devlin.
And I'm Kristen Meyer. Thank you for having us today.
Well, fantastic. And I'm sorry, your teacher is Mr. Hansen?
Mr. Trankel and Mr. Hansen. Mr. Trankel's gonna win.
So just one other thing, where in Illinois are you from? Where's your high school?
We're from Park Ridge, Illinois, which is about 15 miles outside of the city of Chicago.
It's near O'Hare.
Is there any other city but Chicago?
Not us, I don't think.
Okay, so this is Unit 4, as you know, and you also know the question, but I'm going to read it just to make sure we're all, I guess, literally on the same page. Members of Congress are not only legislators, but they are also inquisitorial and should meet frequently to inspect the conduct of the public officers. That's a quote attributed to George Mason. How effectively do you believe Congress has used its investigatory power? Explain the differences, if any, between Congress's power to investigate and the power of oversight. Which power, in your opinion, is more significant? How effectively do you believe Congress has used its oversight powers? And you can begin whenever you're ready.
Woodrow Wilson said, "It is the proper duty of a representative body to look diligently into every affair of government and to talk much about what it sees. It is meant to be the eyes and the voice of its constituents." Serving as the eyes of the people, the investigatory powers are generally used effectively as they are one of the strongest congressional tools to fulfill its duties. However, investigations that are politically driven and unrelated to legislative purposes tarnish the effective use of investigations and oversight.
Based on Article 1, Section 1, the ability to investigate any matter having to do with legislative purposes allows Congress to maintain its power relative to the executive branch. In Watkins, United States, the Supreme Court stated that the, quote, power to conduct investigations is inherent in the legislative process. That power is broad. Historically, Congress has launched investigations, including the Watergate Committee, to probe the government. Some presidents have refused to cooperate by exerting executive privilege. Congress relies on the courts to enforce subpoenas to support effective investigations.
In cases such as US v. Nixon and Trump v. Mazars, the court has stressed balancing the administration of justice against maintaining confidentiality. Investigations are a part of the congressional impeachment power as they are used to discover grounds for impeachment. In addition, investigations are the basis for legislation, such as with federal labor legislation in the 1930s. As executive power grows through executive orders, informed legislation promotes the will of the people.
Investigations amplified by divided government are often politically motivated and opposed. Investigations are not limited to the oversight of the other branches. They can be used to develop public policy. Congressional investigations on Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers cemented public opinion opposing the Vietnam War. Investigations are essential to Congress's lawmaking functions, but they should serve a purpose, as dictated by Kilbourne v. Thompson.
The McCarthy hearings and the House Un-American Activities Committee became extremely controversial. Committees can subpoena information from individuals or other branches as established in McGrain v. Daugherty. An ineffective use of the investigatory power is politically motivated and does not result in legislative action, probe the legality of certain actions, or check the other branch's power. The Supreme Court and the people are the ultimate checks on the ineffective and unconstitutional use of the power.
Although investigations and oversight intend on keeping the executive and their administrative agencies in check, oversight is the more significant power because it serves as a constant investigation. Through special studies, hearings, and investigation, Congress constantly exercises its oversight power to ensure the proper execution of laws.
In contrast, investigations are launched for specific purposes related to government wrongdoing, such as during the Teapot Dome scandal. Both investigations and oversight aim to check the executive branch in different ways. However, oversight serves as the source for the basis of investigations.
Oversight has been used effectively as it has prevented corruption of a growing executive branch and bureaucracy. Bipartisanship is essential to effective oversight, as more can be accomplished when the parties work together to check the executive branch. For example, Congress passed legislation to reform the IRS after confirming that supervisors pressured collection officers to harass citizens in the late 90s.
Ultimately, the activities of standing committees, such as the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, serve as the quote catalyst that spur Congress and the public to support vital reforms in our nation's laws, as Senator Sam Ervin said. However, there are executive pushbacks against these actions, such as President Trump's refusal to comply with certain congressional subpoenas.
The investigative and oversight powers are invaluable tools as they define Congress's ability to hold the executive branch accountable, an essential check in our system of separated branches. James Madison remarked in Federalist 51, "You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself." Thank you. We are now open for questions.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Let me start out. You mentioned that often there's a political motive. You mentioned the McCarthy hearings. Should the motivation of the committee or a particular senator or congressperson, is that relevant constitutionally to the right to conduct these hearings, and should it be?
I would argue that the motivation behind investigations should be to pursue good governance, as the Lugar Center states on its index of measuring good investigations and good oversight. An example of good oversight investigations would be the Watergate Committee, which worked with bipartisanship, public relations, to not only find the facts of the Watergate scandal, but also to discover legislation that should be introduced to improve governance. For example, they passed the Ethics in Government Act, they increased sunshine laws, they also passed financial campaign reform. So those essential motivations behind improving governance as a whole is essential to oversight investigations.
Well, when you say, so let me just follow up a little bit. So I completely agree with you that it would be a better world if that were the case. But when you say it's essential to it, I just want to make sure I understand what you mean. Does the Constitution, is it essential in the sense that it's constitutionally required, or just like it would be a good idea?
Well, as stated in Section 1, Article 1, the investigation power is sourced behind the legislative function of Congress. And so, as stated in McGrain v. Daugherty, in order to legislate properly, Congress must have all the facts of a certain idea. So that is where legislation and investigations play the role and base off each other.
In addition, as Kristen said, investigations and oversight are implied powers from Article 1, Section 1, but they're also implied from Article 1, Section A, which is the necessary and proper clause. And I think that the investigations should be more directly written in the Constitution, because because they're not, it's hard to find the line of harassing the executive branch and actually doing a good investigation. I believe investigations should be trying to help improve our government. For example, the Preventing Terrorist Attacks investigation, which resulted from 9/11, it was looking into the cracks of our defense system, and we wanted to make sure that this event never occurred in our nation again. And it passed a bipartisan legislation, S-187, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which helped fix these cracks in our system and helped our government. And a bad investigation would be seen with Whitewater, which Kenneth Starr had a clear vendetta against the Clinton family when he was looking into their real estate holdings.
Additionally, the Supreme Court ruled in Kilbourne v. Thompson that Congress can only launch investigations into subjects that they can validly legislate, and they can't violate the separation of powers. Additionally, they said that the private affairs of individuals are not a part of congressional investigations.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that Whitewater was you believe an improper or bad use of the investigatory powers because the person who prompted it had a vendetta against the Clinton family. Is that correct?
Yes.
So my question then is, what if they would have found corruption? Would it have been a good investigation? I mean, just because the person who is motivated to start the investigation has, political advantage to gain or has some reason to try to punish an opponent, that if there actually was if there was some corruption or fraud or something going on, would it have been a good investigation? And if so, should we punish legislators for investigations that don't have a substantial outcome?
No,
or should not?
We shouldn't punish legislators that have necessarily like a vendetta, but if that continues throughout the investigation and it maintains a partisan investigation, then we should, prevent that investigation from happening. And obviously bipartisan investigations are way more effective. One example of that is the Intelligence Agency abuses of 1975 to investigate domestic spying by the CIA. So the select subcommittee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities also ended up investigating the NSA, the IRS, the FBI, and the Defense Department. And Senator Frank Church led over 120 public and private hearings with about 40 meetings that ultimately led to a 14-volume report. And this investigation was so effective because it was bipartisan and fact-seeking. And it not only asked who was responsible, but how did it happen and how can it be prevented from happening again?
I would say with Whitewater that it was a bad investigation, but it did lead to the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which was very good. But I think that the Kenneth Starr just got lucky by finding that type of information. When he started the investigation, he did not have good enough cause, as I stated with the Preventing Terrorist Attacks investigation, comparing those two. So I would say he got lucky by finding the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which was very good, and it led to Clinton's impeachment.
I think even if he had uncovered more corruption, the investigation itself would be much more effective and valid if it was bipartisan, because then it would have a more clear purpose of uncovering an issue and solving it, as opposed to bringing harm to one politician or family.
I want to ask you about the distinction between investigatory power and oversight power. You said in your initial presentation that oversight was a constant investigation and was the source for investigations. And I'm interested in investigations such as the steroid abuse in baseball, the tobacco industry in the 1960s and their knowledge of the danger of cigarettes. Were those sourced from some sort of oversight of Congress? And does the investigation need to be related to a power that Congress has?
Well, oversight and hearings specifically deal with the execution of laws, whereas investigatory hearings deal with some sort of wrongdoing. As evidenced in the coronavirus hearings, they are conducted to see how different relief packages were executed. For example, with the CARES Act, a bipartisan commission was set up between both houses and to create more of an effective investigation into the loan. So through different hearings on how those different legislation were carried out, there are different sourced investigations.
That's time.
Wow, thank you very much.
Wow, that was excellent.
Yay. Yay. All right, fantastic. Let me start out with some comments, and then I think the other judges will have some as well. So you guys are remarkably well informed about the historical antecedents or the historical record, if you will, about various investigations. I, of course, people of my age remember Watergate like it was yesterday, but it probably sounds like, for many people of your generation, it must sound like ancient history, and maybe it sounds like ancient history to you guys, but you at least appreciate its relevance today. I was very interested in your discussion of the church hearings, which is a more obscure but certainly no less impactful investigation from the mid 70s. I was in college then and remember it very well. Of course, not everybody agrees that the church hearings were a good thing. There are many who will argue that the church hearings' major impact was to dilute the effectiveness of our intelligence agencies, and if you go to a Heritage Foundation seminar, you will probably hear someone connect the dots directly from the church hearings to 9/11. So it's obviously we don't have time to really parse that out, and I wish we did. I would the only sort of just by way of maybe some constructive criticism as you go forward is you might want to work on, you're so well informed that your answers might have been too long given the amount of time we had, and what it means is it does limit the number of other issues that we can ask about and that you can by which you can demonstrate your own proficiency. So just as a matter sort of tactically, if you will, we the people tactics, if there is such a thing. One thing to work on is getting your answers a little more, I don't know if I call them sound bitey, but a little more clipped. But I think that's a quibble. And really my sort of overall impression is I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mimic everything Andrew said, and as a coach, I spent a lot of time coaching teams and helping them prepare for competition. I can say that we the people tactics absolutely is a very, very important thing. And I think that overall you guys did an incredible job of utilizing tactics and utilizing the information you had to really walk us through and demonstrate the breadth and depth of your knowledge. I was incredibly impressed, even at the national level. I think you guys were leaps and bounds above the expectations as far as supporting evidence goes. You had so much knowledge, and more importantly, you had a command of that knowledge that you rapidly were able to pull it out and utilize it in ways that was really relevant to the point you were trying to make. Spitting a bunch of knowledge at us isn't that important if you aren't connecting it to an argument. And you did a really effective job of that. And you had just so many examples for everything. I was just trying to take notes and I couldn't take notes on everything as fast as you guys were bringing it at us. I was really, really impressed with all of that. In fact, there was a number of examples here that I wrote, like, I have to go look this up now. I'm going to go Google a bunch of things and learn from you guys. I do also agree with Andrew that I wish we would have had time to go into some more deeper issues. And because you gave so many examples and they were all great and relevant, we didn't get to go deeper. And I have no doubt that if we would have, you absolutely would have excelled in those questions as well. But I would have liked to see a little bit more. So I think the word that I would use is concise, right? Rather than giving us 6 examples, give us the 2 that are the most important, or the ones that most well inform your position, or the argument you're trying to make, because then we can ask another question and those other examples are still going to possibly be relevant, right? You have all of these examples to use them as we go and continue to build a story with us, rather than spitting it all out like it's a varsity quiz. You know what I mean? But really, really impressive overall. Excellent job, girls. You should be very proud of yourselves.
Thank you.
I also was very impressed and thought the foundation of your knowledge was, vast and impressive. My quibble is with what everyone else has mentioned. By the fact that you responded so much to the questions, we were not able to ask a lot of questions. And I know participation is one of the criteria upon which you're judged, but I don't think that means that all 4 of you have to answer every question, because that's what then draws us down to not having the opportunity to really follow up with you. And I'm just going to point this out. You're dressed alike. You all appear to have long hair. Given the camera position, it's not always clear who's speaking. So I don't know if you maybe would raise a hand or something so that we have a clue about that. But maybe if 2 of you respond on one question, then 2 of you go on the next, instead of all 4 have to respond on every question, because that did sort of take away. But the level of your knowledge and it's obvious you've done extensive research into this. So just making the answers more succinct and thinking a little bit about how to, tactically approach each competition. Only suggestions I have. Very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
If the only constructive feedback we have for you is about tactics and organization of the presentation, you are doing very, very well.